And now I would like to begin today's presentation by introducing Ann M. Guinn. Ann Guinn is a practice management consultant to solo and small law firm practitioners. She has been a featured speaking at ABA meetings, as well as solo and small firm conferences across the country. Her book entitled Minding Your Own Business, The Solo and Small Firm Lawyer's Guide to a Profitable Practice is available at www.americanbar.org. You have to click on the ABA store to find it. And Ann, at this time, I will turn the webinar over to you.
Good morning or good afternoon, wherever you are. Thank you for joining us today. I'm going to be sharing with you some of the lessons and the tips that clients that have helped get our workload business and work with.
You're cutting out. Could you start over? Ann, this is Julia. Could you please start over? It's been cutting out. Thank you.
Okay. Sorry for the glitch there. My name is Ann Guinn. I'm going to be sharing today with you some tips and some practices that have worked for my clients and myself in bringing new order and control to our businesses and some sanity back into our lives. Opportunity here to get control over your workload and over your work environment and be able to function in the manner you'd like to be working. So we've got lots of ground to cover today. I just want to tell you that I have been in the legal field for more than 30 years. I've been doing consulting to solo and small practice now for about the last 18 years. And when I go into attorneys' offices, I see everything under the sun, but what I notice is that there is a direct correlation in many instances, not all, but many instances, between the appearance of the work environment in the systems and procedures they have in place and their certainly their productivity, but in their revenue generations. I find that when my clients have total chaos in their offices, they're working with a lot of clutter, they don't have systems, things are kind of thrown together and they're flying by the seat of their pants. Often their financial side of the business is in disarray as well. There's some chaos there. They're not up on their financial statements. They're not tuned into where the money is going, where the money is coming from, if the money is coming at all. And I can't help but believe that some of this chaos and disorder carries over into their personal lives as well in their relationships. But we're here today to talk about how to get your business, your practice organized and getting you some control here. There's a high cost of, Julia, the PowerPoint is frozen. There's a high cost of clutter and disorganization in your practice. The opportunity for missed deadlines, not following through on promises to clients, risk of malpractice or bar complaints, not making as much money as you could, increased stress levels. Clients lose trust in you when they come in and see chaos and they think, oh my gosh, where's my work in there, and how are they possibly keeping on top of that? A lot of unpreparedness for the unexpected, can't accommodate something that comes out of the blue easily because there's no system for handling those sorts of things. Oftentimes I find my clients are working on the wrong tasks at the wrong time because they forgot what they need to do, or they can't access the materials they need easily, so they just pick up anything under the sun and work on that. I find, too, a situation in a number of instances where my clients, the attorneys, are going to court with incomplete files. And that just terrifies me more than anything. Let me see here. All right. Thank you. That's the one, Julia. I find that when files are out of sight, a lot of times they're out of mind because there's not a system for retrieval. There's not a system for documenting what needs to be done next on any particular projects. They're spending money on storage fees to store stuff, things that they don't need any longer, files that are 35 years old. They pack up boxes just to get it out of the office, send it off to storage, and then it never sees the light of day again. There's a lot of stress for staff as well as attorneys when there is clutter and disorder. Nobody quite knows what needs to be done next or how to do it, and things fall through the cracks at that point. I think one of the most telling costs is the actual lost revenues. The National Association of Professional Organizers tells us that executives lose on average 180 hours a year looking for lost, misfiled, misplaced documents. Now, if you bill out at $200 an hour, that's $36,000 a year in lost time looking for things that you need to process in your work. So a huge, huge cost there, an actual physical cost. All right. Julia, next slide, please. In order to understand how to get a control on this, get a better handle on this, you need to understand your role in the law firm. If you've read Michael Gerber's two wonderful books, The E-Myth Revisited and The E-Myth Attorney, How and Why Small Businesses and Small Law Firms Don't Work and What to Do About Them, he lays out the three roles that entrepreneurs or small business owners play. And this is how they would look in a law firm. There's the entrepreneurial side. That's the person with the vision of what the firm can be. There's the manager. That's the person responsible for the day-to-day operations of the business. And there's the technician. That's the attorney who performs the legal services. Well, in solo or small practices, that's pretty much one and the same person. You don't have an infrastructure with a paid manager, or you certainly don't have a paid visionary. So you need to understand that you are fulfilling all three of those roles. And those three roles will come into play here when you are developing your systems and procedures to get your office organized. We're going to take a look here at how that would play out in your law firm. Julia, next slide, please. You need to first let the entrepreneur loose in you, and that's, again, the role that has the vision for what the business could be. You need to clarify that vision. You need to know what your perfect law firm would look like. And think for just a moment, if you could design any law firm in the world, what would it be? What would it look like? What would your office look like? Who would be working for you? How would things be run? Who would your clients be? What sort of services would you be providing? What kind of environment would you be working in? Where would you be located? And what could you do better than any other law firm? So you first need the entrepreneur to get clear on the vision of what your practice could be. And then we turn loose the manager. And that's the next slide, Julia. The manager is the one, again, responsible for the day-to-day operations of the practice. And the manager makes sure that things are running efficiently, productively, that the office is staffed, that you have the proper resources, that you have all the tools. I'm amazed when I go into a law firm and I see people running around like crazy looking for letterhead because somebody forgot to order letterhead. It boggles the mind how these folks are getting by. But the manager is the one responsible for seeing that those things get done, either personally or through delegation. So turning the manager loose here, the manager will tell you what your clients expect from you and your firm, and what your employees expect, and what resources you need to create your perfect law firm. So the manager has an important part to play in pulling together your policies, your procedures, your systems, etc. Then we move along to the technician here. On the next slide, we see that the technician, who is the attorney, tells you what you need to do to meet client expectations. what you need to do to meet deadlines, provide excellent service, allow your employees to do their best work every time. So the attorney looks at it from the technical point of view. What do I need to do to get the work done, to get it done properly and on time? So we roll all of those together here using the input from all three, and that gives us the basis of starting to organize your practice and getting a handle on the workload, on your workspace, on your staff, and ultimately serving your client better. So we move along here to the next slide. We'll talk about organizing your workspace. When I started in the legal field way back in the last century, I was a legal secretary. I sat outside an attorney's office in a little cubicle. It was not my boss. But people would come up to me and ask if Hayden was in today. The reason they would ask me is his desk was piled so high you could not see him behind the desk. His room was lined with piles and piles and piles of paper that were about thigh high. And this was his work environment. He would sit in there at his desk, and because there was not a square inch uncovered, he had to work on his lap. And people would stop again and ask me if he was in, and I would look and say, yes, he's in, or no, he's not in. And people never understood how I could figure that out. Well, there was a little gap between two of the piles, and Hayden was bald. The light would hit his head, and I could see a reflection. And that was the only way I could tell if he was even in his office. It was astonishing to me that he could function like that. He seemed to know where everything was. He had this amazing ability to walk over to a stack and pull out a document you were looking for with tremendous accuracy. The problem was he spent about 190 days a year out of the office servicing a client in Southern California. When he was gone, if somebody else needed something from his office, needed to retrieve a document or whatever that had never made it to the file, they were at a complete loss. And this was just malpractice waiting to happen on a daily basis here. So in organizing your office space here, you want to make sure that it works for you, that it supports you, that it allows you to do your work to the best of your ability with the proper tools handy, with the access to the files that you need, the paperwork that you need. Excuse me just a second here. You want to set up the workspace in an as efficient a manner and clean a manner as possible with the least amount of clutter, the least amount of superfluous objects. Having a picture of the family is fine, a picture of your dog is fine, whatever, but a lot of us keep things on our desks that have no business being there. They're taking up precious space and they're distractions to us. So in your workspace, the first thing you want to do is purge. The thing that works best, which is very difficult to do in an office, I understand, but the thing that works best is to take everything out of the office and then only bring back in the things as you need them. Good in theory, not so easy to do in a law office. I understand that. But if you pick an area at a time and purge the things that you haven't used in months, the things that you use very infrequently, either toss them out, repurpose them, put them on somebody else's desk or in some other storage container, or donate them. I moved my office about 17 years ago, I guess. I moved from one state to another. I donated a huge amount of my office supplies because I realized I was storing them. I didn't need them. I wasn't using them. I was just paying money to store them. So you can donate things to schools. They're grateful to have all sorts of office supplies, your church, your temple, charity groups, whatever. But get rid of the things that are not important to you. Establish work zones. Understand what your workspace is supposed to do. Depending on the size of your office, you may need an area designated to meet with clients. Now, that may simply be you sitting at your desk and the client sitting on the other side of you, but you may also have a little table off to one side, a conference table where you meet with them. You need an area to do your document generation. That would be at the computer and the keyboard if you have a printer nearby. and you need the tools that would go along with that. You need possibly to have a place where you could assemble document packages. That may be not in your office, that may be out in another work area, but if you're a solo and you have no staff, your office may be everything to you. So you need to think about where you could have an assembly/mail work zone. So kind of map out your office, what you need each area to do, and then that's going to tell you what needs to be in each area. You need to assign a home to the things that you're going to have in your workspace. If you need, you use a stapler on a regular basis, the stapler needs to be within arm's length, pens, pencils, pads. But things like CLE binders and all of that don't need to be at arm's reach. They may not even need to be in that room with you. Assign a home and make sure that that home is appropriate to the work zone. Labels are really important in organizing workspace. I discovered this some years ago when I was trying to make the best use of my little tiny kitchen. And a friend of mine told me, you've got to label shelves, label containers, storage units, or whatever. Makes a big difference if you put labels on file folders, if you put labels on shelves to indicate what belongs there, especially in a supply cabinet. Gosh, I go into some law firms and open up the supply cabinet, and it's like Fibber McGee's closet. Things come cascading out. There are boxes jammed in there in every which way, and I can't even imagine how much time is spent looking for things, or how often somebody ends up ordering supplies because you can't find them. They're in there, but you have no idea where they are, so you think you're out and spend more money ordering supplies. So I'm a big believer in labeling where things need to go. And then you need to commit to restoring your workspace. At the end of the day, before you leave, spend 5 minutes putting things back where they belong so that when you come in the next day, you're able to start up again in a clean work environment, the supportive work environment, and you're not dealing with clutter from the day before. You know where everything is when you need it. You can access it easily. Excuse me. Gosh. All right, Julia, next slide, please. You need to do the same thing for your computer. Back one. The same thing for your computer. You need to organize zones on your computer. Julia, back one. You need to set up folders or, well, that's the obvious thing, but on my computer I have set up, of course, contacts. You can do a lot of this through all of your software programs, case management and Outlook and various software programs have these sorts of features already. I have a contacts area. I have an area for my to-do list, which would be tasks or notes, depending on the program you're using. I have set up a folder for work in progress. And what I do with that is when I'm working on a project for a client, I'm usually handling multiple clients at one time, I keep things in their client folder on my computer. But if I'm working on something that I don't complete, I put that in my work in progress folder so that at a glance I can go in there and see the 5 different things I'm working on at one time. I don't have to go to each individual client and think, oh my gosh, where was I on this? You know, did I finish that or not? So until I actually complete the task, it stays in my work in progress folder. I also send out all of my bills via email now. And I have a folder for outstanding bills. When I prepare a client bill, I put it into the outstanding bills folder. Once the check comes in and the bill is paid, I transfer that bill, mark it paid, transfer it then to my client folder and enter it in my ledger at the same time. But that way, at a glance, I can tell who's paid and who has not paid. I don't have to go back to individual folders. I don't keep paper copies any longer of my bills, so that works really well for me. Keep a folder for reading matter. I don't know about you. I'm sure you get probably more reading material than I do in a day. in email. I get newsletters, I get blogs, I get everything under the sun, and I can't have that clogging up my inbox. So that is all set to transfer over to a folder, and then I can just address that as I have time, which isn't very often for me, but at least it's out of the way. It's not masking some important email in my inbox that I might miss because of the huge amount of unimportant materials that are coming in. I have a folder set up for personal emails so that I'm not, again, tempted to get into those and read those during the day and respond to those and all of that. They just filter off. Anything from family, from friends, goes off to the email folder here for personal. And then I have a pending folder. That's where I transfer my emails that need me to take some action, but I'm not ready to do anything right now. So I know that I need to check that at least on a daily basis, if not several times a day, to make sure I'm not missing anything. But I used to use my inbox as my to-do list, and I would just keep things stacked up in there. Well, I found that I was not as attentive as I should have been, and I was missing things. So setting up a pending folder for things that need action that I'm not ready to do quite yet has been really helpful to me. So using the computer as a management tool is such a critical part of maintaining an organized practice. And I know that most everyone I encounter is using software to some extent. I also know that I don't have a single client who is using their software to the maximum potential. They're using what they have learned to use. They've jerry-rigged things, but software can do so much in so many, many, many different ways. They have so many functions that we don't tap into. So it would behoove you to spend some time and take a look at what your software can really do for you and look at how you can incorporate those things into your practice. All right, let's look at eliminating our time wasters. Julie, next, please. I was working with a client a few years ago. It's a sad story. She did it to herself, but it's a sad story. She called me because she wasn't making enough money. I went down and met with her, did some interviews of her and her staff person to find out what was going on. And by her own admission, she was spending about 6 hours a day playing free cell on the computer. The reason she was playing free cell, she said, was that she needed a stress reliever because she was incredibly stressed out and not able to function unless she could get rid of some of this on occasion. So she fell into the free cell habit here. The reason she was stressed out was she wasn't making enough money. And I thought, okay, there's cause and effect here, and she's not seeing this. She's spending 6 hours a day playing free cell because she needs to relieve the stress of not making enough money. One of my friends, an attorney, a brilliant woman, did what I thought was one of the most courageous things I've ever heard of. She deleted the games folder from her computer. So if computer games are your time wasters, you need to consider doing that. I have a client who comes into the office and reads the local newspaper every morning online. I asked her why she doesn't do that at home because it costs her about half an hour a day to do that. And she said she never thought about doing it at home. And I said, well, what do you do when you're having breakfast? And she said, I drink coffee and I look out the window and, you know, thumb through a magazine or whatever. So we shifted her non-business reading to her home life and got rid of that. But we each have some time waster or time wasters in our lives. A candy dish, a small thing. I used to have it when I worked in a law firm. I had a gumball jar on my desk, and people would come in and grab gumballs all day long. Well, I just recently read a survey or a study that said when you are deep in concentration on a task and you are interrupted for any reason at all, even for the briefest reason, somebody stops by and says, I'm going to lunch, it takes you 20 to 30 minutes to get back to that same level of concentration. Now, had I known that at the time, I sure never would have had the gumball jar in my office because people were in and out all day. But you need to think about what your time wasters are and what they're doing to your practice and your ability to control your work and increase your productivity, and you need to make some hard decisions there. If you're not sure what your time wasters are, I'm going to give you my 30-day challenge here. My clients hate this and love this. For 30 days, you write down every single thing you do during the day. And if you're getting coffee, you write that down. If you're reading emails, you write that down. And you write down the time you spend doing that. This is not a timesheet. You don't need to write what client this was for or whatever, but you just track your time for 30 days. It will be a real eye-opener to you to see where your time is actually going. It's going to show you your time wasters. It's going to show you tasks that you're performing that would be better suited for someone who is not at your billing rate. Pass it off to a secretary, an outside bookkeeper, another lesser paid attorney. 30-day time challenge will be possibly the best thing you ever do for your practice, because it really points out the flaws in your workday and how you could get more time without putting in more hours. So I encourage you to do that. One thing I want to share too is on this frequent interruptions thing. Having been a secretary, I know that if I had a question, I would pop up and go over and ask my attorney, what I should do about this or whatever. I didn't do it very often, but I did on occasion. I know there are people who, especially new on a job, who have a lot of questions. And again, the interruptions distract you, and it takes you a long time to get back to that level of intense focus. So here's my recommendation to you. Start a quarter to the hour rule, and that is very simple. You tell everyone in your office that you are going to be working on things and you do not want interruptions unless it's a life or death situation. But at quarter to the hour, it is okay for them to come in and ask questions or return work to you or whatever. You may want to set this up at an hourly basis, but you might want to do it every other hour. Sometimes they won't come at all. They'll have nothing they need to give back to you or ask you about a quarter to the hour. But you can be prepared and you can limit your interruptions that way. The same with phone calls. If you can have somebody corral your phone calls, take messages or whatever during certain sacred work times, and then you return the call at a preset period, that's going to give you a lot more control over your time. You're going to eliminate those interruptions that just play havoc with your day. One other tip here I want to share. I did a CLE a few months ago, and a friend of mine was there. He said that I gave him one tip that was worth the cost of admission. It was a 3-word tip. I was stunned that it was this simple, but I told him to close the door. And he started closing the door, and he added an hour to his billable time that day and about an hour to an hour and a half every day since. He said that's going to add $60,000 to $75,000 to his bottom line easily this year because he closes the door. His problem was he was eavesdropping on his staff, and he would hear them in conversation, and he just had to listen in, and then sometimes he'd have to get up and go out and make a comment or whatever. So something as simple as close the door can make a huge difference in your productivity. Let's talk about how to organize your work schedule here then. How do you get through the day? Julia, next please. If you're working from a to-do list here, I have a suggestion for you. Rather than a to-do list which goes on and on and on and takes a lot of review trying to pick things out, if you could just know that you're going to have a limited amount of time during the day, 7 hours, 8 hours, however many hours you plan to work, choose 2 or 3 priority tasks per day that absolutely must be done today, and then plan out how you're going to do those tasks. What you need to have gathered together, you need the file, you need certain tools, you need to make a phone call to get information or whatever. Plan out those tasks carefully. Block out work time on your calendar every day, and I do this at least a week in advance. On the Friday before, I'll plan out blocks of time the following week. I know what I have to get done. So I block out from 10 to 12 on Monday, I'm going to be working on the Williams matter. And from 2 to 4, I'm going to be working on the Redenbaugh matter. So I block out the time and I assign tasks to that blocked time so that I know specifically I'm going to be doing this and this and this. I schedule in routine tasks as well. For instance, billing. I am amazed always at how many small firms can't manage to get the bills out on a monthly basis, and their complaint is we don't have time. If you schedule time to bill, to prepare the bills, to review the bills, to mail them out, you'll get the bills out on a regular basis. You'll have them planned into your regular workday, and you'll be planning your other work around that. The billing is so critical, obviously, for you, but for your clients. They get really antsy if they're not getting bills on a regular basis, and then they start getting angry because all of a sudden they have a bill that's for 3 or 4 months worth of work, and they haven't budgeted for that. They've budgeted for a monthly bill. Make good use of your software. Again, using the computer probably at a deeper level than you are now. Use notes and tasks to keep you on track with this, but nothing at all replaces the calendar. To help yourself further with the calendar, some tips that I find so helpful to me and my clients are using on a regular basis. If I have an appointment with a client, I have that entered in my calendar. I also enter the client's address and I enter the client's phone number. If I'm going to the client, I've got the address with me. I've got the phone number in case I get stuck in traffic. If you have to schedule a phone call, you need to call a client on Thursday to remind them of something. Then on the calendar, put the client's name and put the phone number and put a note about why it is you're calling them so that you know at a glance what it is you need to be doing at any point in time. Use the calendar for more than just scheduling purposes. I use it as kind of a catch-all. I print out maps and stuff them in my calendar, clip them in there on the day that I'm going to need them. I clip in invitations or tickets or whatever. I still use a paper calendar. I have things on the computer as well, but I take my paper calendar with me to, you know, the hairdresser or whatever and sit and review that. If you're really into the PDAs, that works just as well. Then you need to start working on what's coming into your office. You need to assess everything that comes in. You need to determine if it requires action, and if so, what, and when, and by whom, and what the next action is. What do you need to do next on this? Do you need to do it? Can you delegate it? Do you need to defer it? Can you drop it? Every email that comes in, every letter that comes in, every document that comes in, you need to look at on an individual basis and decide what you need to do with it. The best time to do that is when it comes in. One of my clients was in the habit, he was not an attorney, this was some years ago, not an attorney, I have to stress that. He would go through his mail about every 3 weeks. Obviously, attorneys don't do that, can't do that, but you need to set aside time on a daily basis to go through the mail and establish your priorities and address each piece of paper that is in that mail. Do you need to keep whatever it is? And if so, why and where would you keep it? And then you need to move it there. I want to do a quick exercise with you here. In looking at your day today, I want you to pick one thing today that's really on your mind. It's something that's really been hanging heavy over you. You know you need to do it, haven't quite gotten around to it yet. And I want you to write down on a piece of paper quickly here what this task or this project or this situation is that's bothering you right now that you know you need to address and you haven't done it yet. So take just a second and jot down a couple of words to describe that. Then I want you to write a brief little sentence here about what the successful outcome for this problem or situation would be. And it could be that the project is done. It could be that you've gotten this in the mail, that you've returned that call. But make a note here of what the successful outcome would be to tell you that you could then take it off your list, get it off your mind. And then lastly, I'd like you to write down the very next physical step that you need to take to move this forward. For instance, if you need to respond to a client's request, then you need to perhaps go to the computer and send an email, or you need to make a phone call, but first you need to get the phone number. So think in terms of what the next physical action is that you need to take to move that situation forward. And there you've got the plan to handle this task, to progress it. You may not progress it to completion, you may not need to, but every task can be broken down into smaller steps, and sometimes that's all you have the time for, sometimes that's all that you need to do, is just take that next step. All right, let's talk for a moment here, Julia, next slide please, about developing some systems for handling your work here. Solid systems are critical to good management in a law practice. Michael Gerber in his E-Myth book says management is less about who gets things done in your business than about how things get done. And I've become so fascinated by systems in about the last year. I'm seeing so much potential in small law firms to develop solid systems that will eliminate the need for adding, in some cases, additional staff, for adding maybe additional attorneys even, just getting things organized. A couple of months ago, I was invited to a small firm. It was one attorney, she has a contract attorney, and she has a legal assistant. I have never in my life seen a better organized office. None of them had a scrap of paper on their desk that was not being addressed at that moment. They had a system for everything. I went into the coffee room, and there was a system, a procedure, a process written out on the wall how to make coffee. Went into the their work center where the photocopy machines are and the supply cabinet and all of this. And on the wall was a step-by-step process for using the copy machine and then for using the scan feature. They had systems in binders. And the wonderful thing about this was that anybody could come into this office and make sure that things get done. So if the legal assistant is out sick, runs off with Robert Redford or whatever, somebody else could come in and know exactly how to handle the work that is to be done. Don't need to bother the attorney with questions because it's all here. You need to fax a document. Here's the page that tells you how to fax. No need to go ask Margaret about this. It was a wonderful, wonderful system, and I just was so incredibly impressed by that. So the thing about systems is you have consistency. You know that a task is going to be handled the same way every time. You know that your clients are going to have the same experience every time. You can avoid mistakes, and you can actually go on vacation because everything is written out. Anyone coming in could pick up the slack here. If you are taken ill or hit by the proverbial bus, another attorney could come in here, go through your files, and know exactly the status of everything and know exactly what is to be done next on anything. So you have a system set up if you're doing family law. Okay, we filed this document. When this document comes in, this is what we need to do. These are the documents we need to gather together to submit to the court, et cetera, et cetera. So developing systems can make a huge difference in your productivity, in the management of your time, in your stress level. Julia, next slide, please. The systems ensure that every file is assembled in a uniform manner, that your work goes out on time and error-free every time. that just boggles the mind, having been a support person, having been in law office management, and now working as a consultant to small firms. The fact that you could have such tremendous consistency, and the consistency at the level of performance you envision for your practice. You could be a small firm up against a big giant and still have consistency and get the work out properly with your systems here. Julia, next slide, please. So how do we develop systems? Next one. There's some very simple steps you need to take, and this is not going to be a quick and easy thing. But first, you write down every task in the office, even the once-a-year tasks. This is going to take you a long time to do. This is not something you're going to do this weekend or this afternoon. But you write down every task in the office. Don't overlook the little things, like going to the post office to pick up the mail, or going to the, if you don't order supplies online, if you have to drive to Office Depot or whatever. Those sorts of things need a process as well. And then you write down every step of every task that you're taking now. Julia, next, please. Some of the examples would be that you might have a system developed for opening the client's file, or answering first-time callers about your services and fees. That would involve developing a script for whoever answers the phone. You might have a process for entering your time and producing your bills, for drafting documents, for purging closed files, for interviewing. How do you go about that? How do you handle the recruiting process? For conducting staff meetings. A process, a system in place for everything. Systemization is not about managing people. It's about managing the process so that anybody can handle the task at any time, even if you're not there, even if the key person is not there. I don't know if you've ever experienced this, but you have a key person who's been with the firm for 23 years and all of a sudden gets it into his or her head that they want to retire to Hawaii and they're gone in 2 weeks, taking with them all that corporate knowledge and all the stuff they carried around in their head. You never fully understood what all they did. You don't know how they did things, and all of a sudden you're scrambling here trying to fill in the gap. That won't happen when you have processes committed to paper. Write them down, store them where people can find them. So you need to ask yourself with every task then, what is the outcome we want to achieve? And let's look at purging closed files. All right, we want to get rid of files that are more than 10 years old, say. And are we achieving that outcome every time? If you're not achieving the outcome every time, why not? What's not working for you? If you are, how could you get it even better? And are you lacking a system to achieve this outcome? I was in a firm a few months ago. They decided to purge their files while I was there, and just went through, looked at dates, pulled anything that was more than X number of years old, and dumped it. Not the best way to purge files. They should have gone through the files, reviewed them, looked for any original documents, looked for anything that might not have been filed with the court, looked for any loose checks, anything like that. So a system is going to make all the difference in the world to how the work is accomplished, how these tasks are performed, and you're going to ensure that they're done properly. Julie, next, please. You need to then consider, if you need a system, what would the system look like if you created the one? If you already have a system, what is stopping you from achieving your desired outcome? That may be that you don't have a person assigned to handle the process. It may be that the process doesn't make sense now. Maybe it did 10 years ago when you set this up. Maybe it doesn't now. Technology has made such a difference in law firms and the way things are handled and how law is practiced and how work is accomplished that old systems may be completely passé now. So you need to think about what you've got in place, how it's working, and what needs to be improved. Next, Julia, please. I'm going to give you a quick example here. To achieve your ideal outcome, I have developed scripts, and I want to just share with you really quickly. Let's say that you want to develop a process for answering the phone. So I say develop a script. The script is helpful for a number of reasons. If you have a staff person answering the phone and they're having a bad day, they may not come across really well for you, and that's your first impression with your potential client. If you have a temp in for the day, they may not be answering the phone in the way you want. They may be answering the phone in the way they learned 4 temp assignments ago. You may want to control what your caller is hearing in terms of answers to questions about your fees or about how you work or the types of cases that you handle. So script takes care of all that. It doesn't necessarily have to be somebody reading it word for word, but they need to know what to say here. And answering the phone, your script might be something like this. Smile as you pick up the phone. Smiles can be heard by our callers. Say, thank you for calling the Browning Law Firm. This is Ann. How may I help you? If the caller asks to be transferred to a specific individual, say, thank you. May I please have your name so that I can tell Jim who's calling? And so forth. That's the idea in setting up systems here. You map out every step so that there's no room for error, so that you know everything is being accomplished the way that you want it to be handled. And then you need to make sure that everybody knows the written process. Go over these processes on a regular basis in your staff meetings. Review them if you have them posted next to the copy machine, for instance. Take a look at that every once in a while and make sure it still makes sense. Make sure that people are following the processes. Ask them for input. What's working, what's not working, what do you find awkward about this, what your clients say, what's not working so well for them. And tweak and fine-tune as you need to along the way there. Julia, next, please. The bottom line with all of this is you start with a vision of your perfect firm. What does it look like? How do you want it to operate? What's the level of performance that you expect out of your firm and out of your employees? If you've got systems in place, if you have written processes in place, you can take an average employee and have them doing the work of a superstar because everything is mapped out. There's no room for question there. You need to make sure that everybody knows your desired goal. Even if you don't have a process in place, there's some one-off sort of thing that comes up. Everyone in the firm needs to know that your goal is, for instance, putting the client first, doing what's best for the client first, always acting with integrity and honesty, whatever, but make sure that everyone is clear on your goals. Trust the system. And never stop getting better. Don't ever think that you have reached nirvana here. There's always room for improvement. There's always something more you could do. And do it in little incremental steps. Take a process and say, okay, this is what we're doing. Done it this way for 6 months or a year now. What can we do to make this a little smoother or speed it up a little more? So keep looking for ways to get better and better and better. Your clients will love you for it. Your staff will love you for it. You'll feel less stressed and more in control of your practice. You'll know that things are getting done. You'll know that the quality is there, the consistency is there. Julia, next, please. Again, Gerber says, change is the ability at any moment to sacrifice what we are for what we could become. I hope you'll take the challenge here and have the courage to make the changes necessary to become what you can become, to grow that firm in the way that you want it to grow, to reach its potential, to be a satisfying practice for you, to be serving your clients in absolutely at the highest level of performance here. So take that challenge and be willing to address the issues in your firm that are not working now, be willing to make the changes, be willing to think outside the box and try some new ideas here. Julia, next, please. All right, we're down to the question time here. Do we have questions? And I'm sorry.